Hello and welcome to this edition of Ritter's Rant. Today we're going to be talking about the law of war. Um, I think everybody by this time has heard about the horrific attack that took place at Starobelsk College, Teachers College, part of the Lugansk University network. And I think 21 students between the age of 16 and 18, mostly girls, some boys, were murdered in this attack. President Putin has articulated an action by the Ukrainian enemy that involved multiple waves of drones attacking. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a drone that had gone off course. This was a deliberate act of murder carried out by Ukraine against innocent civilians. Now, Russia has responded and will continue to respond. As this video is being made, the Russian government is announcing that they are going to continue strikes against Kiev. They've advised diplomatic missions to leave the city and civilians to leave the city. So, it appears that an appropriate response to the crime that has been committed, will take place. But what's interesting is not what the Russian government's doing per se, because that's logical. It's how the West has treated this attack, which is illogical. There are many in the West who continue to believe that Ukraine was justified in carrying out this action, that this was a legitimate target under the law of war. People like Jeff Fisher, former Air Force colonel, current CEO of Fisher Aerospace, based out of Poland, a man who makes his living today promoting the war in Ukraine and profiteering off the war in Ukraine. Has put out posts on social media that show, Ukrainian children in military uniform linked to the Starbelsk school network. And he says, this is proof that this was a military target. They put out videos that show, Ukrainian or Russian military personnel at the university talking to people in the classroom. Proof. But is it really proof? I mean, what do the images show? They show, the Ukrainian children participating in an annual competition that has a military aspect to it, but which is not a military competition. It's a competition of physical fitness, teamwork, etc. But it doesn't matter. The law of war prohibits civilians from being targeted. And these kids, these children, even though they wear a military uniform, are not active duty combatants by the law of war. They're civilians. And it's just a one-time event. It's not like they're part of a junior ROTC program or an ROTC program. But even if they were, the law of war protects them. They're civilians. They're not on active duty. And the college itself is protected as a civilian institution of higher education. But Jeff Fisher and the other warmongers out there, that's not how they operate. And this is important because, you see, they're part of a system. They're part of a system that justifies the war in Ukraine and facilitates the ongoing actions. And it gives us insight. Because if the simplistic brain of Jeff Fisher can look at these photographs and, breathe ill intent into them, what happens when, for instance, Palantir applies its artificial intelligence technologies to the problem of developing targets for an expanded Ukrainian drone campaign against Russia, one that is promoted by the British, who are seeking to use the drone campaign to break the spirit of the Russian people, waging mental war against the Russian people because they can't win the war on the battlefield. So they're going to try and win the war in the minds of the Russian people. In order to do that, you have to attack a lot of targets. England's talking about providing Ukraine with 16 to 20,000 drones this year. Volodymyr Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, is speaking about a massive drone campaign over the course of the month of June to include the possibility of launching up to 6,000 drones a day against Russia. Don't know if he can achieve that, but just think about that for a second. 6,000 drones, that implies 6,000 points on the ground, 6,000 targets. Where do you get those targets? As somebody who's done targeting in my lifetime, I know that to do it responsibly, You have to look at the target, assess the target, gather intelligence information about the target, and ascertain whether the target has genuine military connectivity as a legitimate target under the law of war. Make sure that you make distinction between potential civilian applications, and then you also look for proportionality. Even if it's a legitimate target, if we bomb it, do we achieve a disproportional result on innocent civilians? These are things that the human brain runs through, a human brain empowered by knowledge and information that's promulgated in laws of war manual, international humanitarian law, the Geneva Conventions, the human connection. But what Palantir is promoting isn't the human connection, but artificial intelligence, which isn't really intelligence. It's just basically a giant computer being programmed to do things with obvious outcomes. So rather than having somebody scan through a database and look at a photograph and say, aha, people in uniform at Star Bells College, let's dig deeper. Oh, it's just a civilian war game. These aren't military people. It's a one-time event. The college has no relationship to military activity or the war in Ukraine. Therefore, it is a civilian target protected. We don't attack. But now if you just tell the computer, find evidence of military connectivity, it sees a photograph, sees a uniform, sees the name Star Bells College, and says, this is a target. We are going to attack it. That appears to be what happened. That the Ukrainians, using Palantir-related targeting data, selected this target to be struck. So now we go to how they attacked it and what they attacked it with. It appears they used what's known as an FP1 drone. FP Firepoint is a company created by a Ukrainian grifter to bilk billions of dollars from the West, et cetera. But they do produce equipment like FP1. FP1 is basically a wooden, glued together drone made from Chinese components that has proven to be very effective. It is the number one drone used to attack. If you see drones hitting buildings in Moscow, it's an FP1. If you see a drone striking an oil facility in Russia, it's an FP1 drone. If drones fly over St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, they're probably going to be FP1 drones. It's a mass-produced drone of some capability. Now, the Ukrainians have taken these drones and they've also put air-to-ground rockets on them. So each FP1 drone can have 3 to 6 rockets that are then fired. So the drone has a double effect. It can fly in, fire rockets, and then peel off and come in and attack the target. Why is this important? Because some people believe that maybe these drones just went off target, that they didn't know what to do. But the eyewitness accounts from the students who were attacked say they heard rockets fired. They saw rockets coming in. FP1 drone is a propeller-driven light aircraft. So obviously these are FP1 drones with rockets on board. That means that somebody's watching the target, because those rockets don't fire themselves. Somebody's watching the target. And we know that this is the case because one of the drones found a small Starlink antenna of the kind that's used for command and control to relay back to a ground control station that's watching the target, orchestrated attack. So there's a Ukrainian set of eyes on target telling the drones to fire rockets into this school. And it wasn't just a one-time deal. They fired, rolled back as students came out, fired again, rolled back as students came out, fired again. And then once they've exhausted all their rocket supply, the 4 drones, bang, 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 into the building, collapse in the building, killing 21, injuring scores, mass murder, a war crime beyond belief. This was a carefully orchestrated criminal action by Ukraine and their British masters, because you see this campaign, this attack, is part of a larger effort by the British called Keeping Ukraine in the Fight that has an important psychological component. It's not about defeating Russia on the battlefield. Ukraine can't do that. It's about collapsing the will of the Russian people to continue the war. And this is what is happening here. This drone campaign being run by the British, orchestrated by the Ukrainians, is designed to wear down the Russian people. But I think they failed. One could call this almost a Pyrrhic victory. You see, they launched an attack against the school and they murdered civilians. But that's, from their standpoint, it's okay. You see, the Ukrainians and the British are operating from the Pete Hegseth model of warfare. More lethality, less legality, or in this case, no legality. So killing innocent girls while they sleep is a good thing from the Ukrainian perspective because they believed that the Russian people would buckle. They believed that the Russian people would lose the will to fight. They believed that the Russian people would surrender psychologically. But just the opposite is happening today in Russia. There's more anger than you can possibly believe. And the Russians aren't saying stop the war, they're saying win the war. And that appears to be the direction that the Russian government's heading. But the Russian government will follow the law of war. Every target struck by the Russian government will be linked to Ukrainian military activity, command and control activity, defense industry activity. Let's get back to the FP1 drone. Why did Russia strike some of the targets they struck when they hit Kiev? For instance, a museum, a shopping center. People say those are civilian targets. The FP1 drone is produced in Ukraine in facilities Ukrainians acknowledge are secret. They have to keep them secret and they have to keep them hidden because otherwise Russia would destroy them. And most of these facilities are hidden in civilian buildings, in garages, in basements, in halls that otherwise would be considered for civilian use only, but now they've been converted into a drone manufacturing point. So when you see a burned out museum, understand that the Ukrainians were using that museum to produce the very drones that attacked and murdered 21 innocent girls and boys at the Star Bells College. When you see a shopping center blown up, understand that the garages in that shopping center were used to produce the FP1 drones that attacked and murdered these innocent civilians. When you see something that's called a civilian target burning, it's because it wasn't a civilian target. It's because the Ukrainians have violated the law of war by bringing defense industry into what should be a civilian facility, hiding behind a human shield. But the Russians, they don't kill civilians. They blow up these factories, but they did it in a way that minimized human casualties on the part of the Ukrainians, unlike the Ukrainians, who maximized the human tragedy of the Star Bells College by deliberately murdering sleeping girls and boys in an attack that had no legitimacy under the law of war, no military benefit, purely murder. Murder. Well, that's my rant. Next time a thought crosses my mind, I'll be sure to let you know.